And look, this border crisis is unfortunately one of many crises that we're seeing from this Biden administration that they refuse to confront. And the border crisis is a clear example of a catastrophe that was created by President Biden's own actions that can only be fixed by President Biden, and he could fix it today. The fact that Vice President Harris refuses to do her job and go to the border shows you that they know how bad it is, and she doesn't want to see it so that she can try to deny it exists. But it's real. When she was asked just the other day by Lester Holt, after she tried to insinuate that she's been to the border, which is not accurate, he challenged her on it. He said, no, you haven't been to the border. And then she just gives this bizarre laugh and says, well, I haven't been to Europe either. I don't know if Vice President Harris understands the crisis is not in Europe, it's at America's southern border, and she and President Biden created it. They could fix it today if they just reinstated those policies that were working. Remain in Mexico was an agreement President Trump had actually negotiated with the president of Mexico, and it was controlling our southern border. The wall, the barrier, if President Biden doesn't like President Trump, he can call it something different, but it was working. The agreement with the Northern Triangle countries were working, and he reversed all of those things to devastating consequences. If you wonder how bad it is, just look at what happened over the weekend. McAllen, Texas elected a Republican mayor. This is a heavy Democrat city right on the front lines. I know when I went a few weeks ago and brought 10 members of the whip team with me to the southern border at the Rio Grande, we were in McAllen, Texas. And it's probably the worst example of where President Biden's policies have failed people on the ground. But look at what they did. They just elected a Republican mayor who promised to get tougher on the border. This isn't just a Republican issue. There are Democrats as well that demand that we get control over our southern border. President Biden will not confront this issue, and Vice President Harris is nowhere to be found. She needs to do her job and get down to the southern border. And then more than that, she also needs to work with President Biden to correct the problems that they created. Unfortunately, they've created a lot of other problems. Just today, the Consumer Production Index came out this morning, and we saw a 6.6% increase. That's the largest increase ever. Families all across America are seeing inflation. Unfortunately, it's here, it's real, and it's getting worse. If you're a family today, you're paying about 45% more at the pump for gasoline than you were a year ago. Futures for oil today just hit around $100 a barrel. OPEC is now relevant on the world market again as a cartel because President Biden shut down American production. Elise talked about it. Chairman McCall talked about it. But think about this. On day one, President Biden killed the Keystone Pipeline, crushing thousands of American jobs and undermining our relationship with Canada. This is Canadian oil that was going to be coming down to America, creating American jobs to refine that oil in America. And President Biden said no to that. But then literally days after Russians hacked our pipeline in the Northeast, President Biden gets a financial gift to Putin by allowing and greenlighting the Nord Stream pipeline between Germany and Russia. And so it is just perplexing to see that President Biden said no to American energy jobs and American pipelines, but yes to Russian jobs, Russian pipelines, and Russian dominance over our allies. This is real dangerous policy that's happening right now before our very eyes that President Biden has created. It's why families are paying more at the pump. His policies are why today, if you buy a new home, you're paying over $30,000 more for that home than a year ago. President Biden needs to be working with Congress to fix these problems. You don't see a bill on the floor this week or next week's schedule to address any of these crises that we've talked about. To stand with Israel. Why won't President Biden stand up to the anti-Semites in his own party? You're seeing this big fight within the Democrat Party right now over anti-Semites and whether they're going to stand up and confront this problem. It's a real problem. It's yet another crisis that they refuse to confront. But we're going to continue to call them out, and we're going to continue calling for actual oversight. Think about this. Just a few weeks ago, we saw this data dump of emails, and we've been calling for over a year for an investigation into the origin of the coronavirus. Many of us, in fact, if you look at headlines from a year ago, they were saying it was a conspiracy theory to suggest that COVID-19 might have started in the Wuhan lab. And many of us were suggesting that we should investigate it because we were getting reports that it may have started in that lab. We didn't know definitively because we couldn't get anybody to talk about it. Do you know to this day, Speaker Pelosi still refuses to have a hearing into the origin of COVID? We had a moment of silence yesterday for 600,000 American lives lost. And yet, Speaker Pelosi, with her majority and multiple committees of jurisdiction that are standing today that could do this, have yet to have a single hearing on the origin of a virus that killed over 600,000 Americans. Why is Speaker Pelosi covering for the Communist Chinese Party? We're calling on Speaker Pelosi to have hearings now on the origin of COVID. Let's look at what we know from the emails. Let's look at what our scientists may have found out talking to Chinese scientists in the Wuhan lab before evidence might be destroyed, if China hasn't already destroyed evidence. We ought to be getting answers to these questions, but for whatever reason, they continue to cover for China's failures. And so we're going to continue pressing for answers on these tough questions.